ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today we commence the 22nd juz, and this begins with the middle part of Surah Al-Ahzab. So a little bit about this surah. After the battle of Uhud, the Muslims went through 7-8 months of great distress and many problems. You see, after the losses at Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ told the companions that Quraysh is not going to stop here, they're going to come back, recollect their forces, and attack Medina once again to completely annihilate and destroy Medina. So he took a group of Sahaba, and only those that participated in Uhud were allowed to go, and he took them to a place called Hamra'ul Asad. When the Prophet ﷺ reached there, he was informed that yes, in fact, إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ, that they have recollected. Abu Sufyan has gathered his people, and they're building up their momentum to come right back. But the Prophet ﷺ was resolute. When Abu Sufyan also found out that the Prophet ﷺ is prepared for this, and in fact he has come out, then those people, they ended up going away. About a couple of months after this, the tribe of Banu Asad from Najd, they tried to arrange an attack on Medina. The Prophet ﷺ sent a group under the leadership of Abu Salama radiallahu anhu, and they were able to repel those people. Then soon after this, these tribes of Adl and Qara, they asked the Prophet ﷺ for people to come and guide them and teach them. The Prophet ﷺ sent 6 of his very special Sahaba, and 4 of them, it was in fact just a trick, it was a trap. 4 of them were killed, 2 of them were captured and then killed after that. Khubayb ibn Adi and Zayd ibn Dathina radiallahu anhuma. In that same month, another group, Ri'al and Dhakwan, they requested for a large group of Sahaba to come and teach them, saying that we have accepted Islam, we have very large numbers, we need help. The Prophet ﷺ sent 40, or in some narrations 70 of those Sahaba that were Hufadh of the Quran, they were Qurra, they were people of ilm. He sent them. This was also a trap, and all of these Sahaba were slaughtered at a place called Bi'r Ma'una. Like this, these attacks kept coming. In this same time, Banu Nadir, the Jewish tribe that the Prophet ﷺ had peace treaties with, they deceived him, and in fact they made an attempt to murder him. They had arranged a meeting, and when the Prophet ﷺ arrived to that meeting, they had somebody behind the wall with a massive boulder ready to push it over and crush the Prophet ﷺ. But as soon as he got there, Jibreel ﷺ came and informed him that, get up from here, this is a trap. He got up, and everyone saw what was happening behind the wall. At that point, he ﷺ gave them, he said enough is enough, because they had been involved in all of these antics. For the last 3, almost 4 years, they had been involved in constantly breaching and breaking and doing all these things. So he said, you have 10 days to vacate Medina. Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, the head of the Munafiqeen, told them that don't go anywhere, don't listen to what he says. The other tribes of the Arabs, Ghatafan and others, are going to come and support you, and it's our time to take over Medina. However, when the period of 10 days was up, nobody came to help them. So then the Prophet ﷺ still gave them a chance, gave them time to get out and escape with their lives. In the meantime, the momentum is building back in Mecca to come again and crush the Muslims. And the Quraysh have teamed up with Banu Ghatafan and other tribes, the Jewish tribes Banu Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa, and Banu Qurayza, the third sort of group of Jews. They remained steadfast in their peace treaty with the Prophet ﷺ. So people tried to get them to come over and break the treaty, but they remained resolute until finally they came and they insisted so much, and they said, look, we have the numbers, we have the power, and we're going to wipe these Muslims out. So then they were also inclined to break the treaty. So this formed an alliance of many tribes across the Jews and the pagan Arabs. They formed a massive army. And such an army was not heard of or seen before in the Arab lands by the Arabs themselves. The Prophet ﷺ then consulted with his Sahaba. Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu gave the opinion of building a trench to protect Medina from one side. The other side, there were a lot of gardens, there were groves, so it would have been difficult for them to march in from that side, especially the south side, which is towards where the Qibla is now. This was all the awali of Medina, and so it was very difficult for them to lay an attack. So they took that area that was the most exposed, and they started digging this trench. In 6 days, they dug this massive trench. And in the meantime, Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud, who was from Banu Ashja', he accepted Islam. So he told the Prophet ﷺ that I am friendly with everyone. I'm friendly with Quraysh, I'm friendly with Banu Qurayza. None of them know that I am a Muslim. Is there anything that I can do? So the Prophet ﷺ said, you go and cause dissent amongst them. You confuse them about each other. So he went to Banu Qurayza and said that, look, the Quraysh are going to demand your men when they want to attack. They're going to tell you that we want to attack, give us your men. But the thing is that you have no security over the spoils of war. They have not promised you anything. So it's better that you ask them that they give you some of their men as, call it as a security. That they will give you some of their men, hand them over to you, they will remain in your custody. You will only release them once you see that everything has been set up for you. And then he went to the people of Quraysh that he was also very friendly with. He said, look, these Banu Qurayza, they're kind of shaky people. They will not help you unconditionally. In fact, they're going to ask you for some securities and promises and some guarantees. So be ready for that. Be very careful and diligent with how you deal with them. So when these groups started communicating, then Banu Qurayza, they said, yeah, what Nu'aym said, it absolutely makes sense. And Quraysh should give us your men. They said, oh, he was right. They're saying, give us all your men. So they followed his advice and said, no, give us some security, give us some guarantee. We're going to keep some of your men with us until everything is set for us. And they said, and the Quraysh said, oh, you see, whatever Nu'aym said, he was speaking the truth. So this caused an environment of distrust where they were already in this state of bickering. Now, when they arrived, they see this massive trench that they cannot traverse, and it's the winter. It is extremely cold and windy, and we read in the books of Surah and Hadith what conditions the Sahaba went through at that time. And during the digging of this trench, they came across a massive mass of rock that they were not able to break through it with any of their tools. So the Prophet ﷺ had laid out for them exactly where the trench is to be dug. So they on their own did not deviate from that. They could have dug around it, but they said, no, this is where we have to dig. We can't do it. Let's call the Prophet ﷺ. He ﷺ came and he took the pick and he said, Allahu Akbar, and he struck it once and a massive spark came out. And such a spark came out that the horizons were illuminated. And the Prophet ﷺ told them that, yes, Sham, Syria has been conquered. He struck it again. Again, a massive spark came out. The Prophet ﷺ told him Yemen has been conquered. Third time he struck it. Yes, the Roman Empire has been conquered. He said these kinds of things. And the Munafiqeen made a big joke about it. And the Munafiqeen are assisting, facilitating, helping this army get together, providing all the logistical support, giving them all the information, acting as spies. They're doing all of that. They said, what a joke. They don't have any food to eat. They're starving. They're cold. This is that occasion when, Sahaba were so hungry. They showed that, we were tying stones to our bellies just to keep ourselves upright. And the Prophet ﷺ lifted his shirt and showed them that he had 2 stones. So that they have nothing to eat, they're starving, they're weak, they're afraid, they're surrounded by the army, and he's talking about conquering all of these countries. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed those verses. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِ الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرِ إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, to the end of the verses, that power, dominion, control is in the hands of Allah. He gives it to whom He wants, takes it away from whom He wants. Now, these collective tribes, they laid siege on the Muslims for about 25 days. It was a very long siege. And there were some skirmishes. There were a few skirmishes where, for example, Amr ibn Abd Wud, he was known as the bravest fighter in the Arabs. So he took his horse and he actually crossed the trench. And he started daring the Sahaba, who is going to, who is going to stand up to me, who is going to stand up. So each time, Ali radiallahu anhu gave his name that, I want to challenge him. Yes, you have a challenger. So the Prophet ﷺ said, sit down. Then again he came and he insulted and made fun of and really instigated them. Again Ali radiallahu anhu stood up. The Prophet ﷺ said, sit down. Then the third time, when he did the same thing, Ali radiallahu anhu stood up. The Prophet ﷺ said, leave him, he is Amr. And it was known about Amr ibn Abd Wud that he was such a skilled swordsman. On his horse, he could take on 100 fighters. So the Prophet ﷺ said, look Ali, he is Amr. So this time Ali radiallahu anhu said, okay, he is Amr, but I am Ali. So when Ali radiallahu anhu came forward, he said that I don't want to soil my sword with the blood of a child. He said this to Ali radiallahu anhu. He laughed. He said, you're sending a boy, a young boy. Here I am, the most experienced fighter. So Ali radiallahu anhu responded to him by saying, yes, but I want to soil my sword with your blood. So Amr flew into a rage and he swung his sword at Ali radiallahu anhu. He raised his shield, but his strike, his blow cut right through the shield of Ali radiallahu anhu and actually struck him on the head. Pierced the shield. And then Ali radiallahu anhu actually had the strength, Allah gave him the strength to retaliate. In one blow he swung back and cut his head off. So these skirmishes were also taking place, but it was not an all-out war. The Prophet ﷺ sent Sahaba like Hudayfa radiallahu anhu to go and see what's happening. And during this process, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made 2 things happen. One is that the discord in the enemy camp became so strong that they could not bear to be with each other. Extreme hatred and animosity amongst them. And the second thing was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent wind. And this wind was cold and it was ruthless. But the interesting thing was, this wind was only having an impact on that side of the trench, not on this side, not on the Medina side of the trench. So although there were some battles, like one day there was fighting back and forth. The whole day they fought. But because of the weather and because of the conditions, it was not sustainable. Then one night Allah SWT sent such a wind that it started toppling over their cauldrons, their big pots of food, and those started spilling, their tents started getting uprooted from the ground, and then their animals started panicking and stampeding, and then they were in a situation where they started getting trampled on by their own animals. So they picked up their bags and they left, they fled from there, and by morning time not one soldier was left waiting there. So this is the opening part, a very important part of the first half of Surah Al-Ahzab. Allah SWT describes the fear and the way they were so organized and the state of panic that the Muslims were in, and what work the munafiqeen were doing, and how they were making excuses to do this and to do that, and all the little trouble that they were causing. So that is an important part of Surah Al-Ahzab. This was read yesterday. This surah also addresses, and I've mentioned this briefly when summarizing Surah An-Nur, Surah Al-Ahzab was revealed 1 year before Surah An-Nur. So we're talking the 5th year of Hijrah. And Surah Al-Ahzab also addresses many marital issues and family issues. So the Arabs had a tradition that if you adopted someone, they are now your real son. They are your real son, they will inherit from you, and they have all of the relations that you would have with a biological son, you have to maintain with this son. But this is not the case in the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had adopted Zayd ibn Haritha radiyallahu anhu, and he was his slave. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had freed him, and he took him as his son, and people used to call him Zayd ibn Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala corrected this. Ud'uhum li'abaihim. You will call them by the names of their true fathers. He is Zayd ibn Haritha. His true father is Haritha, is not Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And later on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies this further. مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِّن رِجَالِكُمْ. He is not the father of any of your men. And then the next issue that came was that Zayd ibn Haritha radiallahu anhu, after he had been freed, adopted, raised by Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had married him off to one of his own cousins, Zaynab radiallahu anha. And she was, of course, a pure Qurayshi, and of a high lineage. And it was considered very odd that this freed slave is being married to a woman of such high lineage. But the Prophet ﷺ himself had facilitated that marriage. He wanted Zayd radiallahu anhu to have the best wife possible. However, over time, the relationship between them became strained. And Zayd radiallahu anhu came to the Prophet ﷺ repeatedly saying that I'm having trouble with my marriage. I'm having trouble managing it. And the Prophet ﷺ told him, "Amsik alayka zawjaka wattaqillah." You do whatever it takes to hold on to your wife, to save this marriage, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in regards to her. As this is happening, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a wahi to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that, "O Prophet, this marriage is going to end, and you will end up marrying Zainab." Now the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that, how is this going to happen? I have had this marriage done myself. I've had these two married, and Allah is telling me that I'm going to end up marrying Zainab. So he did not say this to anyone. He said, if I say this, this is going to become a big issue, a big scandal. People are going to say that he's talking about marrying his own son's wife. He's talking about marrying his own daughter-in-law, according to their custom. So he never said this to anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces this, وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ وَتَخْشَى النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ أَحَقُّ أَن تَخْشَى. You concealed inside what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to expose later anyways. And you had this fear of what will people say. And it was going to be a major social issue. The whole community would have been just, in complete, disarray over this issue. But that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. And when Zayd radiallahu anhu finally, he ended up terminating that marriage, because he was not able to hold on to it. Even though Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised him, hold on to her, do whatever it takes. It did not work. Zaynab radiallahu anha was not happy in that marriage. Okay. فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا وَطَرًا. When Zayd radiallahu anhu fulfilled his need from her, he ended the marriage with her. Allah says, زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. I married you to her. Why? Well, one of the wisdoms was لِكَيْ لَا يَكُونَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ حَرَجٌ فِي أَزْوَاجِ أَدْعِيَائِهِمْ إِذَا قَضَوْا مِنْهُنَّ وَطَرًا. That in the future, no one should ever feel compelled to treat their adopted son like a true son. So once a person reaches the age of puberty, they are no longer considered, your adopted son in that sense. They are no longer an orphan, and this person is free to do whatever they want. You can continue spending on them, you can continue being kind to them, you can do whatever you want, but they will not be considered your son, they will not take your name, they will not inherit from you, and they will not be like your biological children. However, you can treat them as kindly and as nicely as you wish, but things like hijab and parda will be maintained between them and your biological daughters, and all of those things will come into place. So, there was an uproar. As predicted, there was an uproar, and it became a major issue. So Surah Al-Ahzab is revealed in these circumstances. So you have on one side the backdrop of war, and on the other side you have these sort of community issues going on, and rumors, and people started saying especially the munafiqeen, they were there to capitalize on these things. They said, oh, this is what he wanted all along. He wanted to marry his cousin. He wanted to marry the wife of his, even though it was absolutely ridiculous because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had them married. And he was the one telling him that, no, you do whatever it takes to save this marriage. Khair. At the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Zainab radiallahu anha soon after this battle of Ahzab. The command to marry her came before the battle of Ahzab. Then all of the preparations and occupations of war took over for that whole month. And then after that, because remember Banu Qurayza, who have broken their treaty and are still causing trouble, they're threatening to come back. So the Prophet ﷺ said, no, now we need to go. Now we need to go to Banu Qurayza. So at that time, after the battle of Ahzab, the Prophet ﷺ married Zainab radiallahu anha. The books of hadith are filled with the details of how he married her and so on and so forth. In this surah, the Prophet ﷺ was also given permission to marry more than 4 wives. And Zainab radiallahu anha, in fact, was his 5th. But then later on, verses were revealed in which the Prophet ﷺ also was not allowed to marry anymore. And this surah lays down the core framework for the rules of hijab and segregation between men and women. And it is done through addressing the wives of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So protecting the privacy of women and not going into homes where there are women by themselves and their husbands are not there. So if you have to go for some need, if you have to ask them something, then ask from behind the screen. And no one should go and visit them except for their maharim. These details are laid out. Women, on the other side, are advised to spend as much time in the home as possible, unless there is a need for which they absolutely have to go out. And instructions about not disturbing, hurting the feelings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the framework of hijab is laid down here, and those verses were actually revealed at the time of the marriage with Zainab radiallahu anha. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had his walima with Zainab radiallahu anha, and he had invited Sahaba to come and eat at his house, and they were coming in waves, coming and going and coming and going. But some of the Sahaba, after the meal, they sat down. Now Zainab radiallahu anha, this whole time, is in the house, sitting facing a corner, facing the wall. That's what she is doing. And imagine, how long can a person sit like that? And this is a big gathering. There are hundreds of Sahaba that have been invited to this walima, and they're coming and going. But there are some who sit down and start having conversations. The Prophet ﷺ is waiting for them to get up, but they're enjoying themselves. But he also feels that, look, these are my guests. I don't want to tell them that please leave now, we need some space. So he remained quiet. He got up, he went, he visited some of his other families, came back. Sahaba are still sitting there. Some narrations mention that he did this a couple of times. He got up, went, came back, and they're still sitting there. Then these verses, Anas radiallahu anhu was with him, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look Anas, these verses have been revealed. And he, alayhi salatu wasalam, recited these verses. And then the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, when they heard these verses, immediately they got up, they left. And then the first thing Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam did was he put up the screen, he put up the hijab. So, in context of these verses, there are 3 levels of hijab. There are 3 levels of hijab. The highest level of hijab is that the woman not allow the man to see that she's even there. And this is وَإِذَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُنَّ مَتَاعًا فَاسْأَلُوهُنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ. They're behind a screen, they're completely concealed. You cannot see her at all. This is the highest level of hijab. And this is the level of hijab that was maintained by Ummahatul Mu'mineen and by the pious women of that time, and the women after them also. I was relating that Aisha radiallahu anha, how did they used to travel? Even the saddle of the camel used to be completely covered. You cannot see inside it. So this is the first and the highest level of hijab. The second level of hijab is that the woman has to come out of her house for some need. She has to travel and so on and so forth. But she is completely concealed from head to toe. She's completely concealed. So somebody who looks at her can see that yes, this is a woman, but who is she? What does she look like? What is her physique like? Nobody can tell. She's completely covered and concealed. And this is the next level of hijab which applies to a woman when she goes out of the house. And yes, covering the face is included in this. Aisha radiallahu anha, as the hadith of Abu Dawud mentions, she says, we were going for Hajj. Now Hajj, everyone knows that the woman is to uncover her face. But she said that after we had donned the ihram at Dhul Hulayfa and we started moving towards Makkah, then whenever a caravan used to come from the other side, we would drop our head coverings and we would cover our faces. When the caravan would pass, then we would expose our faces. So even in the state of ihram, when exposed to non-mahram men, they would cover their faces. So this is that next level of hijab. The third level of hijab is the bare minimum under which and beneath which there is no hijab. And that is that a woman, when she goes out, she uncovers her face and she uncovers her hands. And this is also permissible in some cases, but of course the desirable kinds of hijab are the first two kinds. This third level of hijab is for a woman who has to go out and do worldly tasks which she cannot do with her face covered. Okay, if somebody has to work and in that setting they cannot cover their face, she is allowed to. If there's a woman who is, she has her own business and she has to conduct her business and people need to see who she is because there are dealings and transactions, then it is allowed for her. But with the condition that there is no fear of fitna. And this is consistent across all four madhabs. Some have said that covering the face is wajib. Like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, he's very firm on this. And other ayim are also quite firm on this. But others have said that, look, if there is a fear of fitna, then she should cover her face. If there isn't, then she is allowed to uncover. So I put this all in front of you. What I am telling you is a summary of some 50 or so ahadith. If you collect them, the ahadith on hijab, you will see that there are three levels that are being talked about and that are being implemented in the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is a brief summary of Surah Al-Ahzab. The surah starts out with the command of taqwa. And it ends with the command of taqwa. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu ittaqillaha wa la tuti'il kafirin wal munafiqin. And at the end, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. And in the beginning it talks about don't fall into the traps of the munafiqeen. In the end it talks about لِيُعَذِّبُ اللَّهُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ, that those people will ultimately be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how the beginning and the end, they kind of tie in together. And the last story that this surah mentions is in reference to Musa alayhi salam. O you who believe, don't be like those who caused pain to Musa alayhi salam. The followers of Musa alayhi salam who caused a great deal of pain. لَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ آذَوْا مُوسَى. They accused him of things, and they silly and ridiculous things, but it hurt him emotionally and sentimentally. It caused a great deal of pain. So of course, in light of everything that has transpired in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Muslims that don't be like those people that cause pain and discomfort to your Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also make us from those who do not cause pain to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam because of our acts. Rather, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those that are entitled to the shafa'ah of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabina Muhammad wa ala